With just one old photograph and an uninvited witness, the political career of a powerful congresswoman froze completely. In exactly 43 minutes, Speaker Mike Johnson cornered Representative Ilhan Omar with her own devastating words, brought out a surprise witness, and revealed a faded photograph she thought was buried forever. In this high-stakes showdown, Speaker Johnson sat face-to-face with Omar, ready to redefine her political standing. Some people did something. The representative chose that infamous phrase to describe the catastrophic events of September 11th. She made this remark during a speech at a banquet in California back in March of 2019. Just 26 minutes before this very hearing began, the grieving son of one of those tragic victims walked right into the room. He wore a black t-shirt. Stark white letters across the front displayed her exact words. Beneath that chilling quote rested a name, Robert Frank Haros, alongside the date, the 11th of September, 2001, the setup, and the opening volley. Sitting across the witness table, Speaker Mike Johnson of Louisiana watched her over the top of his yellow legal pad. When he finally broke the silence, his voice carried the heavy weight of a seasoned constitutional lawyer. He spent 20 years arguing in front of judges, mastering every single detail of the brief. He stated he would ask the congresswoman just one question regarding one specific phrase about one defining day in American history. This opening volley set the immediate stage for a tense, 3-minute exchange. The speaker from Shreveport, Louisiana, would press America's most polarizing congresswoman to justify those 4 dismissive words to a son whose father perished in the South Tower at 917 inches the morning. To understand the true gravity of this moment, one must rewind exactly 26 minutes to the start of the hearing. "You don't speak for my country." Ilhan Omar declared this just 4 minutes into her opening remarks. She wore a navy blazer over a crisp white blouse. A small silver pin, crafted in the shape of the state of Minnesota, secured her hijab. The bright C-SPAN studio lights caught the glint of that pin from 12 feet away. This highly anticipated joint committee hearing, officially titled Foreign Influence in U.S. Federal Programs and Member Conduct, locked onto the schedule for 6 long weeks. Omar attended as an invited guest and former member of the Foreign Affairs Committee. She reviewed the witness list during her flight from Minneapolis the previous night and felt secure. No names on that roster caused her any alarm. Looking at the Speaker of the House, who sat at the lower bench with nothing more than a yellow legal pad, she assumed he lacked preparation. She pressed on with her critique. She offered a backhanded show of respect for his high office, before launching a blistering attack. She expressed deep concern that the individual now occupying the prestigious chair, once held by Tip O'Neill, Henry Clay, and Sam Rayburn, spent 2 decades of his legal career opposing women's rights over their own bodies. She claimed he fought against full citizenship for gay Americans. She stated he demanded immigrants like herself prove their loyalty before granting them the basic dignity of being heard. The Democratic side of the committee reacted with subtle approval, as a staffer in the second row offered a discreet thumbs up. Unfazed and emboldened, Omar continued her verbal assault. She accused the Speaker of orchestrating a hearing about so-called foreign influence while acting under the actual influence of evangelical donors and Christian nationalists. She claimed these backers aimed to transform the nation into a theocracy. She reminded him that these exact same individuals urged him to label her Islamic faith a dangerous religion back in 2017. She concluded her statement. She repeated that the Speaker spoke for their country, not hers, before leaning back in her chair. The unseen preparation. Omar did not realize, and nobody else in that room knew, the man she had just insulted spent the entire previous evening at his Capitol desk with a single staff member. He prepared using 3 printed pages from the House Oversight Committee record, a thick manila folder of Federal Election Commission filings, that he never even opened, and a small leather-bound book tucked into his coat pocket. He condensed all of this vital information into a concise sequence of pencil notes, spanning just 2 pages on his 8.5 by 11 legal pad. That very pad now rested squarely on the lower bench in front of him. The 4-year-old speaker, Mike Johnson, offered no immediate reaction. He did not lift his pen, adjust his glasses, or reposition his microphone. Instead, he placed his blue Bic ballpoint pen onto the pad in one fluid motion, letting it roll an inch before it came to a complete halt. 16 long seconds ticked by, in total silence. Slowly, he opened the legal pad to his first page of handwritten notes, retrieved his reading glasses from the bench, and put them on without bothering to clean them. Turning the microphone toward himself, his voice emerged quiet and controlled. He embodied the exact demeanor of a constitutional lawyer, preparing to guide an unsuspecting witness through a devastating legal brief. With measured respect, he clarified his position to the entire room. He stated he was not there as the author of the 2015 Marriage and Conscience Act, nor as a subcommittee chairman, nor as a Southern Baptist. He was there solely as the duly elected Speaker of the United States House of Representatives. He framed the constitutional question for the committee and the 4 million viewers watching at home. Keeping his eyes locked on his legal pad, he listed a stunning series of allegations. He questioned whether a sitting member of Congress who lied to a federal court, lied to the IRS, and lied to a national television audience about the destination of millions in donor funds should remain in office. He further questioned the ultimate fitness of a member who made dismissive remarks about September 11th in front of a Muslim audience in California. He highlighted that she maintained a top-secret security clearance on the Foreign Affairs Committee for 4 years, while her home state allegedly channeled tens of millions of dollars to a designated extremist organization. Locking eyes directly with Omar, he declared that the true constitutional issue was not about who spoke for the country, but whether she ever told the truth about anything that truly mattered. A heavy, suffocating silence fell over the massive hearing room. Johnson then shifted the intense focus directly to her earlier comments about his faith. He announced he would read from a document she submitted under penalty of perjury to the state of Minnesota. The bright studio lights caught his reading glasses as he referenced a man named Ahmed. Reading from the small, tight, deposition-style handwriting on his first page, he laid out the unyielding legal facts. He detailed exactly how, in 2017, she signed a sworn divorce application under Minnesota law. He emphasized the magnitude of that specific document. She wrote, under penalty of perjury, that she lacked contact with Mr. Ahmed Noor, said Elmi, since June of 2011. He paused, letting the immense weight of that claim settle. The London photograph. 6 full years of zero contact, sworn under oath to a state court. Deliberately, Johnson rotated his legal pad 90 degrees on the bench. Clipped neatly to the upper left corner of the second page was a slightly faded 8 by 10 photograph, held in place by a single paper clip. He explained to the silent room that this was an Instagram picture from June 2015, posted from her own account using the handle Hami and location tagged in London. As he held the page up, the robotic C-SPAN cameras found the photograph. The producer in the broadcast truck quickly zoomed in, allowing 12 million American households to watch the image fill their living room screens. The picture showed a smiling young woman in a hijab, standing comfortably next to a young man in a button-down shirt. The young woman's hand rested casually on the young man's shoulder. The speaker explicitly identified the man as Ahmed Noor Said Elmi. He pointed out the glaring contradiction. The photo carried a date 4 years after she swore to a Minnesota court that she hadn't laid eyes on him. Setting the page down, Johnson leveraged his 2 decades of legal experience to translate this severe discrepancy into plain English for the public. Keeping his eyes locked on Omar, he explained she signed a binding court document claiming 6 years of absolute separation. Yet, she traveled to London, took a cozy photograph with him, and posted it directly online. He suggested she either forgot or assumed nobody would check. She failed to realize that the internet preserves photographic evidence forever. He then escalated the timeline to 2019, when she took her solemn oath for the United States Congress and joined the powerful House Foreign Affairs Committee. He highlighted that securing her top-secret clearance required an extensive FBI background check. During this check, she failed to mention the perjury or the damning London photograph. The Speaker made the stakes crystal clear. The Federal Bureau of Investigation does not allow individuals to lie on a background check without severe consequences. He presented her with a stark binary reality. Either the FBI failed to discover in 2019 what conservative bloggers published globally in 2016, or she lied to the FBI as well. He noted that a third option rarely exists. Backstage in the wings, Omar's communications director, a young woman named Imani Hassan, who stayed with her since 2019, completely froze. Realizing the catastrophic gravity of the unfolding situation, she lowered her phone, abandoning whatever message she drafted. Deflection and pushback. When Omar finally responded, she utilized the highly polished, defensive tone she perfected for countless cable news appearances. She attempted to dismiss the serious allegations regarding her marriage as baseless claims, endlessly litigated by conservative media. She firmly denied that Mr. Elmi was her brother and declared the entire case closed, citing a complete lack of criminal action from the state of Minnesota. Johnson, immovable and quiet, countered her narrative instantly. He clarified that the lack of criminal action occurred simply because the Minnesota Campaign Finance Board already concluded she filed joint federal tax returns in 2014 and 2015 with a man named Ahmed Hirsi, while she remained legally married to Ahmed Nur Said Elmi. He quoted the board directly. They also caught her misusing campaign funds for personal travel to Estonia, resulting in an official order to repay over $3,000 alongside a fine. He emphasized that a guilty finding by her own state's agency, run by Democratic appointees in a state Donald Trump never won, meant the issue remained far from closed. Omar's right hand drifted upwards to adjust her hijab, a minor nervous tell captured by the surrounding cameras. Johnson pressed further. He clarified he wasn't asking for a DNA expert to prove Elmi was her brother, as he hadn't seen the records. Instead, he highlighted her decade-long refusal to provide those very records to the Minneapolis Star-Tribune. He noted her father and sisters actively declined interviews. He pointed out the exonerating documents existed somewhere in her possession, yet she kept them hidden for 10 years. He questioned aloud why any innocent person would withhold documents that could prove their innocence to a hometown newspaper, a state agency, a federal committee, and the American people for a full decade. When Omar offered no response, the Speaker turned to the next page of his legal pad. The handwriting remained the same, small, tight pencil script, though he did not read from it immediately. Lowering his voice by a register, making it quieter but infinitely more intense, he addressed her earlier accusation regarding Christian nationalism and bigotry. He stated the country did not ask her to be black, Muslim, or a refugee, and none of those specific identities stood in question. The country demanded the simple, honest truth about the man in that London photograph, a truth she refused to provide for 10 long years. He drew a razor-sharp line between facing genuine bigotry and facing the legitimate consequences of deceptive actions. In the silent hearing room, he affirmed the public's right to demand answers one more time out loud. With the photographic evidence displayed clearly for all the cameras to see, the betrayal, the E Street Group, and Beth Minot, Flipping the legal pad to the third page, Johnson revealed an even deeper layer of alleged deception. He asserted the London photograph was not, in fact, her greatest betrayal. The true victim of her absolute worst offense, he announced, sat just over her left shoulder in the second row of the hearing room at that very moment. While the cameras held steady on Omar, waiting for their cue, Johnson invoked a highly specific and deeply damaging time frame, 843 days. This was the exact duration between August of 2019, when Tim Mynette's wife filed for divorce, claiming her husband was in love with Representative Omar, and November of 2020, when Omar's campaign terminated its lucrative contract with Mynette's consulting firm. During those 843 days, Johnson's quiet voice revealed, her campaign funneled $2.78 million to the E Street Group. He painted a vivid, damning picture of small, working-class donors who believed they fought the corrupt cancer of money in politics, inadvertently financing the business of Omar's alleged romantic partner. The speaker emphasized the sheer audacity of paying millions to her boyfriend's firm, while both parties remained married to other people and actively lied to the press about the affair's existence. Turning to page 4, which featured hand-copied text from a court filing, Johnson read the sworn words of Dr. Beth Mynette. He established her unwavering credibility as a doctor and the medical director of the District of Columbia Department of Corrections. According to the August 28 divorce papers, sworn under penalty of perjury, her husband confessed to their one-year-old son that he was leaving the family because he developed profound feelings for another woman, specifically Representative Ilhan Omar. Without looking up from his, Johnson subtly turned toward the back of the room. He acknowledged to the audience that Dr. Beth Mynette drove up from Washington that morning without an RSVP. She didn't want to testify. She merely wanted to sit in the room when this specific question finally arose. The broadcast cameras swiveled, finding Beth Mynette sitting stoically in her black blazer and white blouse, her hands folded tightly and motionlessly in her lap, completely dry. Beside her sat a teenage boy in a blue button-down shirt and khakis, looking down at the floor. His mother logged him into the Capitol at 6:53 that morning under the name Noah Mynette. Omar's gaze locked onto Beth Mynette and refused to return to the speaker. Johnson relentlessly summarized the devastating betrayal. While a doctor filed for divorce and an 1-year-old boy learned his father was leaving for a woman named Ilhan, Omar's campaign wrote 146 checks, totaling nearly $3 million to her boyfriend's firm. He lamented that the teachers, nurses, and first responders she constantly claimed to fight for unwittingly bankrolled her personal affair, while the man they paid told his young son he was in love with the candidate. The squad defense, pushed to her absolute breaking point, Representative Ilhan Omar pushed her chair back 2 inches, placed both hands on her desk, and stood up. Channeling 8 years of finely tuned viral media instincts and the fiery energy of her squad press conferences, she unleashed a passionate, morally charged defense. She argued the Federal Election Commission found absolutely no legal wrongdoing in the massive payments made to the E Street Group. She insisted the firm provided legitimate services and that the FEC officially closed the matter. Defending her complex personal life, she reminded the room of her historic status as the first black Muslim woman elected to the United States Congress. She stated she endured extreme scrutiny, harassment, and severe threats to her safety. She dismissed the decade of intense investigations by conservative outlets as having produced 0 criminal charges, 0 indictments, and 0 findings of fraud. Jabbing her fingers into the wooden desk, she condemned the relentless narrative against her as a fundamentally prejudiced and discriminatory campaign. She claimed it aimed to suggest a Somali Muslim woman elected by working-class voters, could not command trust. She accused Speaker Johnson of embodying the very bigotry that propelled her into office. She claimed she represented the bright future of the nation, while he stood as merely a sad relic of its prejudiced past. She declared she was not the one who needed to step down. Her defiant stand triggered loud applause from the progressive press section. A media producer in the back of the room, whose company profited from Omar-friendly content, stood up and clapped with his hands raised above his head. Someone cheered her on. Two Democratic panel members nodded in agreement, and an MSNBC reporter mouthed in real time that she just delivered the perfect soundbite. For 15 full seconds, Omar commanded the entire hearing room. Across the bench, Speaker Johnson did not flinch, interrupt, or gesture. His yellow legal pad sat perfectly squared in front of him, his pencil resting across page 4. When the applause faded away, he spoke with the exact same consistent volume. He zeroed in on her specific claim regarding zero findings of fraud. He reminded her the Democratic-led Minnesota Campaign Finance and Public Disclosure Board explicitly found she used campaign funds for personal expenses, which legally constitutes state-level fraud. Furthermore, filing joint tax returns with a man she wasn't married to amounted to federal tax fraud, a severe offense carrying a potential 3-year prison sentence per count. Acknowledging the FEC found the vendor contracts technically legal, he argued she still committed a profound, devastating moral betrayal against her supporters. She took millions from small donors who believed in her anti-corruption message and handed it directly to her secret boyfriend's firm, destroying 2 marriages in the painful process. He concluded those very donors sat at home right now, wondering if their hard-earned $25 contributions funded a legitimate political campaign or a romantic date. Breaking the floor, and 9/11. The room fell dead silent as Johnson slowly turned his legal pad to the 5th page. The handwriting on this newly revealed page appeared lighter, as if written quickly in a fleeting moment of intense focus. Johnson addressed her proud assertion of being the first black Muslim woman elected to Congress. He agreed it was a meaningful, historic first that the country should celebrate. However, dropping his voice to a near whisper, he stated the country should not take pride in the second thing that followed that milestone. He reiterated the devastating reality. The trailblazing congresswoman leveraged her passionate donor base to enrich her boyfriend to the incredible tune of $2.78 million. She did this while still legally married to another man, while her boyfriend remained married to another woman, and while Dr. Beth Minot, sitting just rows away, explained to her one-year-old son why his father was abandoning their family. After a long, heavy pause, Johnson delivered a crushing blow. He stated she didn't just break the glass ceiling for Muslim women in Congress. She brutally broke the floor right underneath Dr. Minet's young son. He asserted the nation's fundamental right to recognize and remember that profound difference. The broadcast cameras lingered on Beth Minot, who stared intensely at the back of Omar's head, her hands frozen in her lap. Beside her, 7-year-old Noah Minot lifted his head and stared directly at the back of Omar's head as well. Turning to his 6th page, filled with slower, deeply pressed, and deliberate handwriting, the speaker transported the silent room back to the 23rd of March 2019. He recounted her speech to a crowd of 500 at a California banquet hosted by the Council on American-Islamic Relations. He noted the recording remained widely available online for anyone to verify. Speaking slowly and quietly, he quoted her exact, infamous words regarding the post. 9/11 creation of CAIR. She stated, they recognized that some people did something, leading to a loss of civil liberties. Looking up from his pad just once, he repeated that infamous, deeply painful phrase, Some people did something. He condemned her choice of words to describe the horrific attacks in front of a California audience just 6 months after taking her solemn congressional oath. In a final, heartbreaking tribute, Speaker Johnson read out the true, devastating toll of that day: 2,977 American lives lost. This included 343 brave firefighters, 23 New York police officers, and 37 Port Authority officers. The rest, he reminded the silent room, were everyday citizens, teachers, bond traders, janitors, window washers, and a man who simply went to work. The arrival of Nicholas Haros Jr. Speaker Mike Johnson cornered Representative Ilhan Omar with the devastating testimony of a grieving son. He demanded she answer for 4 careless words and say one specific name out loud: Frank Haros. The raw tension in the hearing room spiked as Speaker Johnson dismantled the Congresswoman's infamous phrasing. He reminded her of the dedicated mail carrier who faithfully navigated the 88th floor of the South Tower for 14 consecutive years. He reminded her of the expectant mother whose husband anxiously waited for her return to their home in Brooklyn. They were not simply some people, he stated, with unyielding firmness. They possessed names, faces, families, and funeral services. Exactly 2,977 of them existed. And the attackers who ended their lives, the individuals she casually described as those who did something, had names as well. The perpetrators possessed a name for their horrific actions, and they proudly gave their violent campaign a specific name. Furthermore, they named the nation they intended to destroy, and they named it America. They were not merely random people doing ambiguous things. They were 19 named hijackers, executing a named operation against a named target on a specific, named date. They successfully committed the largest and most devastating mass tragedy on American soil in the entire nation's history. Yet, the Speaker pointed out, the Congresswoman chose to describe this catastrophic event using the trivial, dismissive language one might reserve for a misplaced umbrella. A profound, suffocating silence fell over the hearing room. In the third row, a seasoned reporter from The Atlantic abandoned any pretense of taking notes. He sat completely still, captivated by the unfolding confrontation. Johnson's voice remained steady as he noted the people left behind by those 2,977 lost Americans, the grieving spouses, the traumatized children. The grandchildren remained very much alive. Many of them carried a deep, burning anger, and some waited 6 long years for someone, anyone, on a federal microphone, to ask her to justify those 4 deeply offensive words. Turning his body toward the back of the room, the Speaker announced one of those waiting family members sat in the room today. He specified the man sat in the third row from the back, positioned on the audience's left aisle. This man drove up from Wall Township, New Jersey, early that morning. He arrived at the Capitol at exactly 6:15, unannounced to the Capitol Police, carrying a precious photograph of his father. He also brought a very specific T-shirt. The broadcast cameras pivoted. In the third row, from the back, on the left side, a man slowly stood up. He was a 5'8" construction supervisor, distinguished by graying hair at his temples, and he wore a stark black T-shirt. The crisp white letters printed across the front of the shirt spelled out in bold block capitals, "Some People Did Something" by Ilhan Omar, March 23 RD 19. Directly beneath that infamous quote, printed in slightly smaller letters, rested a name, Robert Frank Haros. Below the name sat the tragic date, the 11th of September, 2001. In his hands, he held an 8x10 photograph. The chairman of the Joint Committee, a Republican representative from Texas, who only learned of this surprise guest at 6:21 that morning, gave a solemn nod and formally recognized Mr. Haros. As the man walked purposefully toward the witness microphone, a wave of recognition washed over the press section. A reporter sitting in the second row whispered an expletive in sheer shock. 3 Democratic House members on the panel who served on the Foreign Affairs Committee back in 2019 recognized him instantly as well. Notably, not a single one of them dared to meet his eyes. The testimony of the son. "My name is Nicholas Haros Jr., he began. His voice carried the immense weight of a 4-year sorrow. "I'm 58 years old. I'm a construction supervisor. I live in Wall Township, New Jersey. My father was Frank Haros. He worked in maintenance at the World Trade Center. Nicholas detailed his father worked there as a dedicated employee for 26 years. He was 62 years old and merely 3 years away from a well-deserved retirement when the taken passenger jet crashed violently into the South Tower at 903 inches the morning on September 11th. He paused, letting the grim timeline sink in before continuing. He recounted the agonizing final moments. His father called his mother at 907, just 4 minutes after the devastating impact. Frank told his wife he remained entirely trapped on the 82nd floor. The smoke grew incredibly thick and toxic, but they bravely attempted to use the stairs to escape. In that final, desperate call, he told his wife he loved her. He explicitly asked her to tell his son, who was 28 at the time, that he felt incredibly proud of him. The phone line went completely dead at 914. The massive South Tower completely collapsed at 959. March of 2002 passed before authorities officially identified his father's broken body using dental records. Nicholas then lifted the 8x10 photograph for the silent room to see. It captured a smiling man in his early 60s, attending a joyous wedding celebration. The photograph showed its age. Its vibrant colors noticeably faded around the edges. Nicholas explained the picture came from his own wedding in June of 2000, exactly 15 months before the attackers took his father's life. He pointed out his father standing proudly next to his new wife. He shared a touching detail. Before the wedding, his wife asked Frank to do her the incredible honor of walking her down the aisle as her own father tragically passed away when she was only 7 years old. Frank happily agreed, and he cried tears of profound joy that day. Nicholas noted he still cherished the video of his father weeping gently. He placed the precious photograph down on the witness table, making sure it faced upwards. Locking his gaze directly on the congresswoman, his voice remained remarkably steady. He fiercely reminded her that in 2019 she stood before a banquet audience in California and then chose to describe the horrific actions those 19 men took against his father as merely some people did something. He demanded she truly comprehend the gravity of what she said. She casually labeled the 19 attackers who vaporized his father with a massive passenger jet as just some people. She completely reduced the brutal, premeditated loss of his father's innocent co-workers, his mother's beloved husband, his children's doting grandfather, and 2,976 other innocent Americans to just something. Nicholas paused again, ensuring every single word landed with maximum impact. "My father had a name, Congresswoman," he declared. He reiterated the attackers had names, and the horrific act of violence held a specific name. It was not an ambiguous something, and his father was absolutely not some people. His name was Frank Haros, a man who worked tirelessly in maintenance for 26 years, a man who cried beautiful tears at his son's wedding, and a man who died trapped on the 82nd floor of the burning South Tower while his helpless wife listened to him say his final goodbyes over the phone. Picking the photograph back up, Nicholas held it extended straight out toward Omar. He stated his sole purpose for coming to the Capitol that day was to force the country to hear his father's name spoken out loud on a federal microphone. right in front of her face. He wanted to ensure that the next time she felt the urge to dismiss his brutal passing as something, she would remember that one of the innocent victims was a hard-working American who paid the mortgage on his childhood home by diligently waxing the floors of a towering building she never bothered to set foot in. He forcefully repeated his father's name, Frank Haros, and the exact time he passed away, 959 inches the morning, in the South Tower of New York. Setting the photograph back down on the witness table, ensuring it still faced up toward the watchful cameras, he turned and walked directly back to his seat without ever looking back at Omar. The Bible and the command. Speaker Johnson did not rush to speak immediately. Deliberately, he removed his reading glasses, folded them carefully, and placed them neatly on top of his yellow legal pad. Reaching deep into his coat pocket, he extracted a small leather-bound book that fit perfectly in the palm of his hand. It was a pocket Bible. Its cover showed visible wear at the corners from years of dedicated use. He rested the Bible gently on top of the legal pad. Speaking directly to the congresswoman, he admitted he had not initially planned to quote scripture during this serious hearing. He acknowledged the fair criticism he received from colleagues in both political parties regarding his tendency to lead with his faith rather than the strict letter of the law. Because of this, he explained, he spent the entire morning leading exclusively with the law. He detailed the undeniable perjury in her sworn divorce filing, the documented fraud in her federal tax returns, the massive $2.78 million in questionable campaign payments, and the 4 devastating words she used to describe September 11th. He paused, letting the immense weight of the morning's evidence hang heavily in the air. He stated Mr. Haros just delivered a profound testimony that legal statutes alone could not adequately address. Without needing to open the worn Bible, he recited Proverbs 1,222 entirely from memory. The Lord detests lying lips, but he delights in those who tell the truth. Leaving the Bible untouched on the pad, he looked intensely at Omar. He clarified he was not trying to force her to find his specific faith. He acknowledged her faith belonged entirely to her. Instead, he demanded she find the basic human decency to speak Mr. Haros' father's name, Frank Haros. He was a man. He had a name, Johnson stated, before delivering the ultimate command, say his name. The massive hearing room fell completely and utterly silent. In the second row, 7-year-old Noah Minette adamantly refused to lower his head. His eyes remained locked fiercely on Omar, without missing a single beat. The speaker pivoted to the 8th page of his legal pad. The handwriting on it showed signs of folding and unfolding, pandemic fraud and Al-Shabaab. He introduced a new, catastrophic timeline, the 8th of January 2026. He read directly from the official committee record of an oversight hearing titled Oversight of Fraud and Misuse of Federal Funds in Minnesota, Part 1. Dropping his voice to a quiet, faint drawl, he detailed a massive fraud network based entirely in her home state of Minnesota. According to sworn testimony by federal investigators, this was the absolute largest pandemic-era fraud in the entire history of the United States. He pointedly noted the criminal operation ran under individuals who arrived in Minnesota through the exact same refugee resettlement programs that brought her and her family to America back in 1995. The sheer scale of the theft staggered the mind. Exceeding $250 million. This was federal funds explicitly designed to feed starving children during the devastating COVID pandemic. Thieves stole it entirely, while actual American children went to bed hungry. Even worse, federal investigators testified under oath that this stolen money routed systematically overseas, directly into the hands of Al-Shabaab. Johnson meticulously outlined the terrifying resume of this Somalia-based extremist organization. They claimed responsibility for taking the lives of 224 innocent people in a single Mogadishu vehicle explosion in October 2017. They coldly ended the lives of 11 American citizens since 2010. The United States State Department officially designated them as an infamous militant-affiliated foreign extremist organization since 2008. He then methodically closed the trap. For 4 crucial years, from January 2019 to February 2023, she sat powerfully on the House Foreign Affairs Committee. She held a highly coveted, top-secret security clearance. She continuously received highly sensitive classified briefings concerning foreign extremist organizations, specifically and undeniably including al-Shabaab. The committee robustly discussed the volatile situation in Somalia in heavily classified sessions more than 30 times during her tenure. During those exact same 4 years, her own home district in Minneapolis functioned as the undisputed epicenter of the largest federal fraud network in American history. It funneled stolen children's food money directly to a militant-affiliated extremist group actively operating against the American intelligence community. In the very country her father once proudly served as a colonel, his eyes locked onto hers with piercing, relentless intensity. He accused her of absolute, damning silence. Despite holding a top-secret clearance, possessing far more classified intelligence about al-Shabaab than any other sitting member of Congress, and representing a deeply affected Somali American district, she did absolutely nothing for 4 solid years. She never bothered to write a single op-ed. She never introduced a single piece of legislation. She never delivered a single floor speech addressing the historic fraud happening in her own backyard. That fraud actively funded extremists highly likely to harm Somali Americans. He presented her with an inescapable binary reality. Either she knew about the extremist funding and chose to remain silent, or she held a top-secret clearance for 4 years, while the FBI miraculously failed to brief her about the massive militant operation happening in her own neighborhood. He noted a third option rarely exists. Under immense, suffocating pressure, Omar's right hand drifted upwards to adjust her hijab. She completed the nervous motion this time, bringing her hand back down to the table. Slipping into her familiar defensive posture, she claimed the allegations regarding the al-Shabaab funding lacked proof. She stated Republicans weaponized them to unfairly stigmatize the Somali American community for cheap political gain. Johnson remained quiet but immovable. He swiftly corrected her. He emphasized career federal investigators testified to these damning facts under oath. They were not partisan Republicans. They were veteran FBI and Department of Justice officials who faithfully served under both Democratic and Republican administrations. He made it abundantly clear the flow of the stolen money stood as an established fact, not a partisan theory. The only remaining question, he stated forcefully, was what she, as a congresswoman with top-secret clearance, representing that specific district, actually did with the vital intelligence she possessed when she acquired it. The entire country, he declared, demanded an answer to that specific question today. The final witnesses, seeking permission from the chairman, Johnson invited 2 final observers to address the committee. The chairman immediately granted the request. In the audience, 2 distinct individuals rose to their feet. The first was an older gentleman, perhaps 67 or 68 years old, distinguished by a stark white beard and wearing a dark, respectful suit. He walked slowly to the witness microphone. He carried the heavy bearing of a man who journeyed much farther in his difficult life than the short distance from the audience seating. Introducing himself as Muhammad Farah, he stated he was a 7-year-old Sufi Muslim who immigrated to the United States from Somalia in 1993. He explained he ran a humble small grocery store on Lake Street in Minneapolis. He openly admitted he proudly voted for Representative Ocasio-Cortez' Progressive Squad in 2018 because he genuinely believed they would honestly and fiercely represent the Somali community's best interests. After a heavy, painful pause, he revealed his personal tragedy. His precious 8-year-old grandson, Yusuf, had his life taken by al-Shabaab militants on the 14th of October 2017, while simply visiting the Leo Beach restaurant in Mogadishu with his mother. The massive vehicle explosion violently claimed 224 lives that horrific day. Little Yusuf stood as the absolute youngest victim, identified by name. His mother only miraculously survived because she briefly stepped outside the restaurant to make a phone call to her sister. Mohammed then held up a photograph for the committee to see. It featured a bright, smiling small boy wearing a vibrant red t-shirt, holding a soccer ball. Unlike Frank Haros' old photo, this picture appeared newer. Its vibrant colors remained intact, untouched by the cruel passage of time. Mohammed explained he diligently read the May hearing transcripts back in January. He absorbed the horrifying testimony detailing how money stolen right from his own city, from his own tight-knit community, directly funded the very monsters who took his grandson. He revealed he spent 8 agonizing years desperately pleading with his elected representatives in Minnesota, specifically including Congresswoman Omar. He demanded to know what actions they took. In all those years, he never received a single response from her or her expansive office staff. He received no comforting phone call, no official letter, not even a brief email. Pausing once more, he clarified his firm intentions. He stated he did not seek an empty apology for the stolen money. He demanded an answer as to why, over the course of 8 long years, she could not find the basic human decency to pick up a telephone. Having delivered his crushing message, he sat down carefully. He carried the photograph of his beloved grandson back to his seat. The second individual to approach the microphone was a woman in her early 50s with brown hair, dressed in a professional black blazer. She walked with her hands tightly clasped nervously in front of her. She introduced herself as Sarah Goldstein, a 1-year-old, registered Democrat who loyally voted for Hillary Clinton, Joe Biden, and Kamala Harris. She stated she lived in Yorktown Heights, New York. This specific geographical detail instantly caught the intense attention of the sharp press section and the whirring cameras. Yorktown Heights, in Westchester County, famously served as the very same town where progressive icon Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez grew up. Sarah shared the incredibly painful story of her daughter, Haros Jr. She was an ambitious junior studying at Columbia University in April of 2024. Her daughter is proudly Jewish. She displayed a traditional mezuzah on the door of her college dorm room. Sarah recounted how, on the tense night of April 25th, Congresswoman Omar visited the chaotic Columbia campus. She walked directly through the highly publicized protest encampment. During a speech later proudly posted to Omar's official Instagram account, the Congresswoman explicitly referred to Jewish students who chose not to participate in the encampment as supporting widespread atrocities. Sarah paused before delivering the devastating consequences of that reckless rhetoric. Her daughter did not participate in any encampment. She simply tried to study for her challenging final exams. However, the very next morning, her daughter woke to find the door to her dorm room aggressively defaced with the hateful word "atrocity supporter." Smeared directly underneath that slur sat a deeply offensive Star of David with a violent slash drawn completely through it. Terrified, her daughter took her sacred mezuzah down that very morning. She completely withdrew from Columbia University just 3 days later. She never felt safe enough to return to the campus. Sarah looked directly at Omar. She clarified she did not blame the Congresswoman for physically painting the hateful slur on her daughter's door. Instead, she fiercely blamed her for weaponizing the specific language that made the targeted vandalism completely inevitable. She condemned Omar for recklessly endangering a Jewish student who merely studied in her own room. She transformed her college campus into a place where she could no longer be safe. Having spoken her heartbreaking truth, Sarah sat back down. The unadjusted hijab. In this incredibly tense moment, Ilhan Omar's famous hijab adjustment finally began. Her right hand drifted upwards on pure instinct toward her temple. Her fingers actually made contact with the fabric. She initiated a small, seemingly insignificant motion she reliably performed at least 200 times throughout her highly publicized career on cable television. It was a well-known nervous tic, a familiar physical comfort in moments of intense stress. But this time, the motion abruptly stopped. Her hand remained completely frozen at her temple, her fingers tightly clutching the dark fabric. She failed to complete the routine adjustment. Her hand did not return to the safety of the table. It just stayed there. 1 agonizing second ticked by. Then 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 full seconds. Because of the frozen, aborted movement, her hijab now sat visibly askew, pulled completely off-center by perhaps a full centimeter. The robotic C-SPAN camera ruthlessly zoomed in on her face. 12 million Americans sitting behind glowing screens watched in real time. A piece of dark fabric remained noticeably crooked on the head of a sitting United States congresswoman, a woman who until just 90 seconds prior confidently adjusted it every 2 minutes for the first 43 minutes of the hearing. In a shocking display of paralysis, she did not even attempt to fix it. Her hand eventually drifted limply back down to the desk, but the hijab remained glaringly askew. In the second row, young Noah Minette continued to stare at her. His mother, Beth Minette, watched her as well. Mohammed Farah cast his eyes downward toward the floor. Nicholas Haros Jr. kept his gaze firmly fixed on the smiling photograph of his late father resting on the table. Sarah Goldstein simply looked at Omar with intense, quiet judgment. 9 incredibly long seconds passed before the speaker finally broke the silence. The final question and the silence. When his voice returned, it pitched even lower than it had been all morning. He addressed the 4 million Americans actively watching the broadcast. He stated his absolute desire for them to fully comprehend exactly what transpired in that room over the preceding 43 minutes. He concisely summarized her devastating record. She callously dismissed Frank Haros, a man who worked maintenance at the Trade Center for 26 years, as merely some people who did something. She sat comfortably on the Foreign Affairs Committee for 4 years, while little 8-year-old Youssef lost his life to an extremist group, funded by money stolen directly from her own district. She publicly labeled Sarah Goldstein's studying daughter as an atrocity supporter, directly inciting the hateful vandalism of her dorm room the very next morning. He emphasized the profound hypocrisy of her actions. She did all of this while occupying a seat of immense power in a chamber whose sole constitutional purpose is to faithfully represent the very people whose names she completely refused to even learn. Johnson clarified her true offense was not simply a betrayal of the working class of Minneapolis, the Somali community, the Jewish community, or even the grieving families of September 11th. Her ultimate crime, he forcefully declared, stood as a fundamental betrayal of the truth itself. She lied about her brother. She lied about her boyfriend. She lied about the massive sums of money. She lied about the infamous 4 words. And she lied by omission for 4 crucial years. He concluded his summation by declaring that today, the country finally remembered the profound difference between her constructed narrative and the devastating truth. The hearing room remained absolutely silent. Moving with highly deliberate purpose, the speaker turned his yellow legal pad over to reveal the final page. Page 9 contained only a single word, written boldly in the same familiar pencil, but much larger than any of the other notes, and forcefully underlined twice. That single word was Frank. Johnson produced no further pages of notes. He stacked his reading glasses precisely on top of the legal pad. He placed the small, worn leather Bible carefully on top of the reading glasses. He solemnly folded his hands together. He informed the congresswoman he held just one final question remaining concerning one specific name. He demanded a simple yes or no answer. The entire hearing room completely froze. He read the haunting details one last time. Frank Haros. Maintenance. 82nd floor. South Tower. Passed away 9:59 a.m. the 11th of September 2001. Pausing for maximum devastating effect, he finally asked, "Was Frank Haros some people? Yes or no?" The agonizing countdown officially began. During the first excruciating second, Omar's left hand drifted aimlessly toward her water bottle, only to stop halfway and retreat nervously back to the table. The second ticked by, then the third. Desperate for immediate support, she looked toward the wings for her communications director, Imani Hassan. But Imani no longer looked back at her. The staffer stared defeatedly down at her own hands. The fourth second passed, then the fifth. Omar shifted her gaze to the witness table. Frank Haros' fading photograph still sat facing proudly upward, capturing a smiling man wearing the very suit he joyously wore to his son's wedding. The sixth second, the seventh, she cast her eyes toward the back of the room. She only found Mohammed Farah staring resolutely at the floor. By the 8th second, she looked toward the second row. Both Beth and Noah Minette met her gaze with unflinching intensity. At the 9th second, completely out of options, she finally looked down at her own trembling hands. The 10th second passed. The 11th. The 12th. Finally breaking the heavy silence, she attempted a classic political deflection. She argued weakly. "The framing of this question is fundamentally..." Johnson immediately cut her off with brutal efficiency. He repeated his absolute demand. "Yes or no, Congresswoman?" The 13th second passed, then the 14th. Representative Omar said absolutely nothing. The speaker offered a single, definitive nod. He didn't bother to stand up. He didn't raise his voice. He left the Bible, the reading glasses, and the legal pad entirely untouched on the bench. He made no effort to gather his materials. Addressing the chairman, he officially yielded the remainder of his allotted time directly to Mr. Haros, Mr. Farah, and Mrs. Goldstein. He noted grimly, they waited for an answer to that simple question for significantly longer than 14 seconds. The chairman promptly banged his gavel, calling for a 30-minute recess. Omar stood up and hastily gathered her scattered papers. Her movements lacked their usual brisk efficiency. She stacked them once, set them back down nervously, and then stacked them all over again. She meticulously avoided looking at Beth or Noah Minette. She completely refused to look at Nicholas Haros Jr. She certainly did not look at the smiling photograph of his lost father resting on the witness table. As she walked stiffly toward the side door, she passed Mohammed Farah's row without turning her head. The grieving grandfather offered her the exact same cold courtesy. She then walked past Sarah Goldstein, who now quietly looked down at her own hands. Just as she reached the exit, she briefly paused and turned back. The broadcast cameras swiveled to follow her every single move. Speaker Johnson remained calmly seated at the lower bench. His yellow legal pad, reading glasses, and small leather Bible sat perfectly stacked in front of him. He wasn't even looking at her. His eyes remained fixed respectfully on Frank Haros' photograph across the massive room. Without looking up, he offered her one final message. He assured her his door remained open absolutely any time. He invited her to come find him whenever she felt ready to bring Mr. Haros' father's name and say it out loud. He promised they could definitely talk then. She offered absolutely no response. She turned and walked out. The heavy wooden door closed securely behind her, echoing with the distinct, dull thud of a door that no one wants to violently slam, but no one cares to gently soften either. The tidal wave aftermath. The cultural and political aftermath hit with the incredible speed and force of a tidal wave. It arrived in three distinct, overwhelming waves. By 11:38 that morning, Eastern Time, three highly specific hashtags completely dominated the top trending positions across every major American social media platform. Number Frank Haros claimed the #1 spot. Number 1, 1-year-old son, dominated number 2. Number 4 years held strong at number 3. The viral video clip capturing Nicholas Haros Jr., powerfully holding his father's photograph on the witness table, rocketed past 47 million views well before sundown. Deeply moved by the testimony, the 9/11 Memorial Museum quietly and swiftly added Frank Haros' photograph to its prestigious rotating digital display by the end of the day. They acted on a deeply emotional request his son made by phone, right from the Capitol parking lot at 1147 that morning. When intensely pressed for comment by the New York Post, Beth Minot offered a profoundly simple, one-sentence statement regarding the ordeal. "My son is 17. He is allowed to grow up now." Her son Noah, when cornered by an eager reporter outside the Capitol building, simply stated, "I just wanted her to see me." In stark contrast, Ilhan Omar's communications director desperately released a sterile, 1-2-sentence statement at 114 inches the afternoon. It functioned as a masterpiece of political deflection. It strategically deployed the word discriminatory 4 separate times, manufactured 3 times, and right-wing distortion twice. Tellingly, the statement completely failed to mention Frank Haros. It completely ignored Yusuf Farah. It entirely bypassed Sarah Goldstein's daughter. It conveniently omitted any reference whatsoever to the infamous photograph taken in London. Meanwhile, the Anti-Defamation League issued a brief, powerful statement. They affirmed Mrs. Goldstein finally voiced what they shouted for 7 years. They expressed a sincere hope that the country finally listened. The Council on American Islamic Relations, the very organization hosting the banquet where Omar originally uttered those 4 fateful words in 2019, pointedly declined to offer any comment whatsoever. The Auschwitz Memorial Museum also offered absolutely no response. They already completely exhausted all possible statements regarding Omar's rhetoric years prior in 2019. The Federal Election Commission predictably maintained their bureaucratic stance regarding the Tim Minett payments. They lazily repeated the exact same phrase they used for 6 years. The matter is closed. Interestingly, when journalists asked the Office of Congressional Ethics if they planned to finally revisit the glaring perjury allegations surrounding the Minnesota divorce filing, they offered a notably different, incredibly tense answer: no comment. Quiet closures. Away from Washington. By the time the sun finally set that historic day, 3 deeply personal, quiet moments unfolded far away from the glaring lights of Washington. In Wall Township, New Jersey, Nicholas Haros Jr. drove his pickup truck slowly back to his home. The arduous drive took him exactly 3 hours and 17 minutes. He had to stop the truck twice to compose himself. He finally pulled into his driveway at 543 inches the evening. His supportive wife waited quietly on the front porch. She watched the entire grueling hearing broadcast live on television. She didn't rush out to meet him. When he parked, she simply opened the screen door and waited. He carried his father's cherished photograph carefully back inside the house. For 24 years, that specific photograph rested faithfully on his personal nightstand. He quietly returned it to its rightful place. Resting prominently above the mantelpiece in their living room sat a yellowing clipping from the New York Post, dated the 12th of April 2019. The blazing headline read, "Representative Ilhan Omar 9/11 was "Some People Did Something." Underneath, a smaller, defiant caption read, "Here is your something," followed by an agonizing list of the names of the lost. At exactly 548 that evening, Nicholas Haros Jr. finally took that painful clipping down from the wall. He waited 6 long, incredibly bitter years for the ultimate opportunity to remove it. He folded the fragile paper just once. He tucked it away safely inside his desk drawer. He refused to throw it away, but he no longer needed to look at it every single day. Hundreds of miles away in Minneapolis, Mohammed Farah woke early. He unlocked the front doors of his small grocery store on Lake Street at 600 the next morning. He performed this exact routine faithfully every single morning for 16 years. However, this morning felt entirely different. An unexpectedly massive line of people waited patiently outside on the sidewalk. The crowd looked incredibly diverse. Some individuals were Somali, and many others were not. They hadn't come early to purchase milk or bread. They stood in that long line for the sole purpose of warmly shaking the grieving grandfather's hand. The extraordinary line stretched far down the block and remained steady until 10 inches the morning. While Mohammed Farah actually sold significantly fewer groceries that morning than he usually did, he absolutely refused to close the store early. He made a point to personally and warmly greet every single person who waited in that line throughout the entire morning. He never once had to explicitly mention his beloved grandson by name. The community already knew exactly why they were there, so he didn't have to say a word. Over in Yorktown Heights, New York, Sarah Goldstein drove back to her quiet home that evening after testifying. At exactly 809, her phone rang. Her daughter called, all the way from her new safe school down in Florida. The mother and daughter stayed on the line, talking deeply for 2 hours and 4 minutes. Her traumatized daughter wept uncontrollably for the first 45 minutes of the call. Sarah remained incredibly strong, refusing to cry and simply listening to her child's pain. Eventually, her daughter's tears subsided enough for her to say, "Mom, you said my name on TV." Sarah simply replied, "Yes, I did." After a moment, her daughter finally gathered the courage to say the words she held on to, "I want to come home." Filled with immense relief, Sarah softly replied, "I know. Come home." The symbolic silence. Back in Washington, Ilhan Omar eventually walked out of the Capitol building at 1,214 inches the afternoon. Noticeably, she did not have a single protective staffer walking by her side. Her fiercely protective communications director was absolutely nowhere to be seen. A relentless swarm of cameras eagerly followed her lonely descent down the grand marble steps. She stubbornly refused to acknowledge or respond to a single question shouted her way. A sleek black SUV waited silently for her at the curb on First Street. She climbed into the quiet isolation of the back seat. The driver, a reliable contractor she utilized for 3 years, genuinely did not know where he was supposed to take her. She never uttered a single word of instruction. The massive SUV aimlessly circled the immediate vicinity of the Capitol complex for 20 full minutes. It became an isolated black box, completely disconnected from reality. Finally breaking the uncomfortable silence, the confused driver politely asked, "Congresswoman, where would you like to go?" She still did not answer. On that unforgettable Wednesday morning in late February, inside a historic Rayburn hearing room, the entire country powerfully remembered 3 distinct names. They remembered Frank Haros, they remembered little Yusef Farah, and they remembered Beth Minette's brave, 1-year-old son, who stands as a strong one, 7-year-old young man. Now, as the heavy SUV continued, its aimless circles physically cut off from the millions of Americans who finally heard the devastating truth. The ultimate symbolic image, forged in that deafening silence. The powerful congresswoman from Minneapolis, stripped of her talking points and trapped in the dark, stubbornly refusing to say a single one of their names,